He was a man whose name opened doors. In the desert, there were no doors to open. She had always walked in his shadow. In the desert, she became the light that kept him alive. Sometimes pride must burn to ashes before it learns the meaning of warmth. The sun burned mercilessly over endless dunes. The private jet, thrown off course by a sandstorm, landed in the wrong place, and the world shrank to heat, sand, and silence. Two survivors, a man who had lived above everyone else, and the woman who had spent years one step behind him. He commanded. She obeyed. And the desert watched, vast, ancient, indifferent to his last name, but quietly aware of her strength. The air shimmered. Sweat never reached the skin. Every breath was work, every step an argument with exhaustion. He held on to his watch, the one that marked time zones and deals. She held on to what truly mattered. Water, first aid, and hope. His shadow covered, hers protected. At night, the desert turned to ice. As the wind sang through the dunes, as the stars, cruel and close, looked down without blinking. He complained about the cold, as if the desert owed him comfort. Still, she placed the thin jacket over his shoulders. The desert recorded it. Who demands, and who endures. He walked ahead, still believing that his name and money could command the horizon. But the sand swallowed titles, pride, and power. She followed behind, conserving strength, reading the wind. She carried his briefcase, and without him knowing, his survival. When the water ran low, he drank first. Later, guilt arrived too late. She smiled anyway, the same quiet smile that forgives out of habit. That smile hurt him more than the heat ever could. The hours blurred. Her lips split open, her hands trembled. The heat painted their skin red and raw. He still gave orders. She still obeyed until her patience finally broke. It happened beneath the sharpest noon. She stopped, breathed, and spoke. Her words poured out like water, raw, fearless, and true. They told him everything no one else dared, that his power meant nothing without humanity, and that his loneliness was self-made. The sun cut through his pride like glass. For the first time in years, he listened. For the first time, he saw her, the woman, not the role. Her hands bleeding from the straps of his bag. Her cracked mouth still trying to be kind. Her eyes burning not from heat but from truth. Something inside him collapsed, like a dune surrendering to the wind, reshaping everything around it. From that moment, the man who commanded began to learn the verb to share. The horizon turned brown, the air thickened. A sandstorm came roaring to life, tearing through the world like a living beast. They hid behind a dune, covering their faces with scarves and torn fabric. The air turned solid with dust. She trembled. He shielded her without thinking. His body bent over hers, his arms forming the only shelter that mattered. The desert screamed around them, but beneath that chaos was the rhythm of two hearts finding the same beat. When the storm passed, he gave her his coat. No apology, just change. The man who demanded became the man who protected. He split the last drops of water evenly. The final sip was always hers. He walked along the edge of dunes to make her path easier. He read the stars, learned the silence. He cared for her feet, wrapped her blisters, whispered warmth through actions, not words. At night, the cold returned like an old enemy. He lay behind her, not out of desire, but to keep her alive. Her back met his chest. Their breaths matched. Heat grew between them, soft, steady, human. In the fireless dark, his hand found hers, and for the first time in his life, his power meant nothing, and that was peace. Hunger arrived in waves. He left at dawn, searching for something more than hope, and returned with dates from a lonely palm tree, salvation disguised as sweetness. He placed the fruit in her palm, as if giving her gold. She bit slowly, and the sugar brought the world back to color. He poured the last bit of water into her hands. Too little, he thought. But little in the desert is everything. The next day, the canteen was empty. The heat mocked them. They walked in silence, eyes dry, tongues like sandpaper, until she heard it. A faint dripping like life whispering from stone. They followed the sound to a split in the rocks where condensation had gathered, dripping into a shallow hollow. He fell to his knees, stunned. She soaked a piece of her shirt, squeezed it over his lips, drop by drop, a baptism of survival. They drank in turns, reverent, wordless. The desert stayed still, almost respectful. It wasn't the water that saved them, it was the act of sharing it. On the fourth day, his strength failed. His ankle twisted. He fell hard. She ran to him, panic and sand in her breath. She tore her shirt to wrap the joint, braced his shoulder, and guided him like a soldier leading her wounded commander. He tried to smile. She didn't let him waste the effort. "Save your strength," her eyes said, obeyed not as a boss, but as a man who finally trusted. Night came deep and unkind. The wind slipped through their flimsy tent. They huddled close, to outlines merging against the cold. Her body trembled. His warmth became her blanket. Their breaths mingled, slow and fragile. His hand traced the curve of her back, not to claim, but to protect. Her fingers rested on his chest, feeling the steady beat that promised, "I'm here." When their lips finally met, it wasn't hunger, it was recognition. The taste of water, of survival, of everything they had endured. Outside, the desert kept its secret. When the sun returned, there was a new light inside them both. He woke first and simply watched her, not as an assistant, but as the woman who had rebuilt him from dust. The world moved slower now. He offered his shoulder. She leaned on it without hesitation. When they found faint tire marks in the sand, they followed, side by side, equals at last. By the time the helicopter appeared on the horizon, they were holding hands. Not out of fear, but choice. The wind swirled around them as they climbed aboard. The noise of civilization returned, but inside them, something stayed quiet, sacred. He had treated her like nothing. Now he couldn't imagine breathing without her. In the reflection of the medic's sunglasses, he saw himself smaller, softer, human. In her eyes, he saw home. The desert faded behind them, but its lesson didn't. Some places lose us only to give us back changed. Some loves are born not from flowers, but from sand and silence. Those are the ones that never break. He canceled the meeting he'd been chasing, scheduled another, the one inside himself. She no longer walked behind him. And when the helicopter doors closed, their hands stayed intertwined, not for balance, but because they'd found their way. Sometimes, the sun must burn us to the bone before we understand what warmth truly means. He learned through her. And the desert finally went quiet.